Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave. Long-time listener in University Heights. We've been a lot better the past few seasons, and that's great, but I think we also need to see things as they are and sometimes ask the tough questions to keep getting better. I think Andrew Barry's been a great GM, but some of the most important pieces, we have to say that, those were there before he arrived, and that his impact and legacy, when you look back at it, will really come down to the Deshaun Watson trade. And if you look at any GM that goes all in for a quarterback, either with a top pick or a mega contract, and what we gave up to get Deshaun as both, is defined by how that player performs. I'm rooting for him to perform like the player we saw in Houston, but really if he doesn't this year, I think we need to hold ourselves to a standard of greatness and say that a GM that goes all in and it doesn't work out probably needs to go. Would a great franchise really stand for that? If you think about some of the great franchises in the NFL and other sports, to me it just doesn't sit right. So thanks again, Dave. Really appreciate the show. Wishing you the best.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Steve, I have a little bit of a different take on it. I think what happened is, and again, I can't disagree with the trade has not been good. But what happens is you take a guy number one overall, you took Baker Mayfield number one overall. It didn't work out. So now you're trying to fix a mistake that was made there. I mean, they could have Lamar Jackson, they could have had Josh Allen. They ended up with Baker Mayfield. So now you're swinging for the fences, and I applaud that actually. He looked at it and he said, Baker Mayfield's okay. We need better. It hasn't worked out, but I like that thinking. I don't think you get rid of a GM for thinking that way. That's the way you win a championship, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a tough one for fans to maybe come to terms with sometimes. But go back to what I said in the last segment. I think if you're evaluating a general manager simply off of his quarterback decisions, I don't know if that's the right way to go because look, the Ravens also took a 25-year-old tight end in Hayden Hurst ahead of Lamar Jackson. They ended up, reconciling and going to get Lamar Jackson later, but it wasn't like they had the perfect evaluation. The Cowboys stumbled into Dak Prescott after they really wanted to trade up to go get Paxton Lynch in the first round. In other words, there's no general manager out there or evaluators who are just always on point when it comes to the quarterback position, which is always going to be the biggest driver in the NFL. So, yeah, I like the aggressiveness. Sometimes you do have to take some swings to try to get better at the position. It's a really uncomfortable position to have, say, the 10th to 20th best quarterback or 10 to 25th best quarterback. I think there's plenty of those guys available right now, including a Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay. Are they excited about what they were able to do with him last year? Yes. Do they think Baker Mayfield's going to take them to the promised land right now? Probably not. So it's a really tricky situation for the general manager, and the tricky situation for the general manager to only get judged by making sure that he gets a top 5 quarterback, right? So, the Bengals are only one of the best teams in the league this year, or, the last few years, because they happen to have the number one overall pick, and it was a year that Joe Burrow came out. So, I think I would rather show patience, go with the general manager who has been consistent, who has built a really good team, a sound team that makes good financial decisions, overall has drafted well, built a really deep roster. And then the quarterback position, you just have to continue to take chances. Even if the Watson one doesn't, work out, you get back and you take the next shot at the position, but you still have a better foundation and infrastructure around that next quarterback if it does get to that point.
Yeah, without question. The thing that hurts, though, is when you have the number one overall pick and you miss like that, that's rough. And again, Baker Mayfield's, he's a decent NFL quarterback. He's not a number one over. You know what I mean? To say anything other than you missed with that pick, number one overall, you're putting on rose-colored glasses.
But very, very few people were saying Josh Allen is the slam dunk number one.
You're right.
Then very few people had Lamar Jackson even going in the top 10. The previous year, Patrick Mahomes went at number 10 and was the third quarterback off the board. That's the point. And look, the quarterback position is held to a completely different standard, because you really want to have a top 5 to 8 quarterback that's a difference maker. If we held every position to that standard, most draft picks would seem like a fail unless you got one of the top 5 to 8 players at the position. So it's just a whole different dynamic at quarterback. And again, I just wouldn't I wouldn't judge an evaluator top to bottom just based off of how they pick the quarterback, because I don't think there's a history of one evaluator or a team that's pristine at making those picks, except maybe the Packers.
Yeah, they've had pretty good quarterback play for a while.